Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I am here with Dave McKeown. Dave, welcome.
Hey, Michael, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, love the energy. Let's dive in. So, Dave, you're a founder, a keynote speaker, you're an author, and you help leaders set and achieve strategic goals. You're the CEO of Outfuel Leadership, where you've worked with clients like FedEx, O'Reilly, Salesforce, and many others. Let's start off today going back in time, 2010. You were working at Accenture. Before that, I know you spent some, so originally from Ireland, then some time in Scotland. You're now based in the US, but take us back to the time, at Accenture. What for you at that time? Like, first of all, what was it like? What was that experience like for you to be working at a well-known consultancy?
It was a fantastic experience, and if anybody's in the early stages of their career and looking for a place to really hone some consulting skills, I can't recommend getting some experience under your belt with a larger organization. Give me a really good perspective on what it meant to be an effective leader in a large organization, and then also how to problem solve and approach clients and develop some really good early stage consulting skills. So I loved it. Had a great time there, but I always felt that ultimately I wanted to move on and do something outside of that. There was always this sense of it just being such a large organization, and I wanted to get some experience in some other environments.
Was there anything during that time, like, you often hear about people working at larger consulting organizations, that their hours are crazy, they're being driven to high levels of stress. Was there anything about that experience from a lifestyle perspective that was challenging for you?
I think all of the things that you talk about do happen, and they probably happen more than not. I was pretty fortunate, actually, that the project that I was placed on, I was in Accenture for close to 4 years, and I was on the same project for almost that entire time. It actually was in one of the industries that wasn't as hard charging. So I was in the healthcare division. We were working with the National Health Service of the United Kingdom, which is notorious for starting at 9 a.m. and clocking off at 5 p.m. So I had all of these peers that I joined with who were going and working in, financial services and tech, and their clients were up till 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night. And, I actually kind of lucked out a lot that the requirements in that perspective weren't so heavy on me. I did have to spend a lot of time on the road, and actually, for a whole bunch of reasons, ended up living essentially in 2 different hotels for 3 years. One it was during the week whenever we were with our client, and then the second one was it actually, for personal reasons, made more sense for me to stay in a different hotel during the weekend rather than go and stay in an overly priced apartment in London. So I spent a lot of time in hotels.
Right. Okay. Well, hopefully you got some perks with all that time. When you kind of, again, look back in hindsight, is there one lesson that you learned, like a really important lesson that you feel that you were able to apply to your consulting business, that by far and away just had, extraordinary or substantial impact more than other things, whether that's something that you're doing now currently and kind of still keep with you, or something that helped you in the early stages? Anything stand out for you?
My manager, my boss during the time there, had an incredible ability of getting individuals or groups of people to really understand the root cause of problems and challenges that we were dealing with, and to stay relentlessly focused on solving that challenge. And I observed this over and over and over and over again, both in the personal interactions that I had with him, and then also these team environments. And it was fascinating to watch, because he did it in such an unassuming way. But, the world of consulting can sometimes, it can be a little emotional. You're talking with people with egos and teams, and you're trying to move towards a common goal. And he just had this brilliant way of just getting everybody to focus on challenges that we could fix, that we could overcome, rather than, staying fixated on emotions or ego or personal aims or goals. And that was something that I think that I observed in him and was able to develop in my own approach with the teams that I work with. And I think it's a very useful skill to have as a consultant.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to dive deeper into this a little bit to make sure we're serving the community and all of our listeners, and can't let you off the hook too easily there, Dave. So break that down a little bit. Can you kind of share maybe an example, either at your time at Accenture where you were kind of witnessing this firsthand, or when you've been able to apply it in your own business with teams and clients? I just want to make it more tangible for everyone. How would you go about making it so that it was easier to identify those problems, and also appropriate or effective when you're dealing with different egos, which anyone that's in client services or professional services, right, deals with pretty regularly?
If you just think about a broad question like, well, what are some of the challenges that you're dealing with right now? And that can be a question that you ask a client at the beginning of an engagement. It can be a question you ask a team of people halfway through an engagement. It can be a question you just ask somebody on a regular conversation. Often, whenever you ask what challenges are you dealing with, the person responding or the team responding will layer out or lay out a litany of issues. Some of them will be directly related to what they're working on. Some of them will be directly related to how they felt whenever they got up that morning. And for a lot of folks, the answer to that question, there's no separation between any of those issues. So, somebody could say, well, my boss is giving me a tough time and my team's not delivering what they need. And my kids were super annoying this morning, and I've got to deal with this thing with my spouse, and traffic was terrible getting to work. And it's just a whole range of stuff. And being able to then unpick all of that and say, okay, well, there sounds like there's a lot in there. Which of these are most pertinent to you? Which of these are most challenging? And getting folks to prioritize the issues that they have in front of them. And then the next step is saying, okay, well, if you could only work on one or two of these, which would they be? Getting folks to really narrow and prioritize and choose the challenges that they're faced with, I think is a really good starting point to then go in and helping them get somewhere.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, I've never heard the unpickling before, so I'll have to remember that. That's a great one. But yeah, I mean, I often talk to clients about this concept of like peeling the layers of the onion back, right? And you want to get to the core. And oftentimes what you'll see kind of consultants do is they'll ask a question and they'll just take the answer at the surface level and then move on to the next. But by going deeper, as you've just really broken down for us here, that's where the real value is, right? That's where the things that really matter start to be identified.
Very much so. And there's actually a great book called The Coaching Habit by actually a fellow Canadian guy called Michael Bungay-Stanier, if you haven't picked it up. That's excellent in diving into that method. And essentially, Michael, his leading principle is the first thing that somebody tells you is often not the true challenge that they're facing, or there's just a nuanced version of it. The problem is we spend a lot of time in our organizations trying to work on that first issue. And the thing is, it's a lot like hitting a golf ball, where if you hit I don't know if you play golf, I play it terribly, but if you hit a golf ball a millimeter off where you're intending to hit it, it doesn't end up a millimeter away from where you wanted it. There's a compounding impact. It ends up in the bunker or the water, or in my case, 3 holes over. And when we spend time solving just even a nuanced, incorrect version of a problem, we can waste a lot of time there. And so just giving the opportunity, giving some space, asking some questions to get to that core challenge, I think will save any consultant or team valuable time in the back end, because you're solving the right problem. The second thing coupled with that is try and back to your original question, what the manager in this situation was very good at was on centralizing the locus of the challenge on the individual. Because so often we can express our challenges as external. They're out there, oh, it's the economy, or it's that team, or it's my boss. And those are all great. Those are very difficult challenges to solve. So centering on the person and saying, well, what's the challenge for you? What are you struggling with? When you can get somebody to open up about that, then you can start working on something that they can actually solve.
Yeah, really powerful. So 2017, you started Outfield Leadership. You mentioned you had, this drive and kind of desire to go out on your own. How long did it take you to feel like things are working, like to kind of reaching that tipping point where you felt enough confidence to not think about ever going back to the corporate world, and just know that okay, yeah, things are moving in the right direction? Was that weeks, months, years? Kind of give us a sense of of at what point did you feel that you'd reached that tipping point?
I probably a year or so. I knew that I could do it, but on my own. And beforehand, I was working for another boutique consultancy company. And I knew I could do it on my own, but I didn't have the track record. And I had a lot of my identity was tied up in the previous organizations that I was working with. And there's always a backstop there. If you're part of another organization, you know, there's always a safety net there. But I think it wasn't all at once. So you get your first client, your first couple of clients. I do some keynote speaking as well. You get your first keynote gig, and I think it just at some point you wake up and you realize, you know what, even if it's not always going to be smooth sailing, which, you know, in our world isn't always, it's something that I'm prepared to make work over the long term, no matter what happens. And the more that I got away from the corporate world, the more that I realized that I think I'm ultimately ill-fitted for it. It just doesn't fit with who I am and how I show up.
Yeah. As you encounter some of those challenges along the way, as we all do, for you, where do you go in your mind, or what do you turn to overcome those challenges? Like when you know, that first year or so, you and everyone, you know, we think like, am I cut out for this? Should I go back to do something else? Like when you reached or hit up against those roadblocks, what did you do? I mean, do you read? Do you talk to people? Like what have you found that's been most helpful? And even today, like when you encounter challenges in the business, how do you find that you're able to push beyond them?
I like to do a reflective exercise, and I do this. My wife and I do this quite often. We ask each other and ask ourselves, if you said to the version of yourself a year ago that this is where you would be a year from now, would you take it? And almost always, I don't think the answer has ever been no. I don't think, just given whatever the circumstances we've gone through, I've been fortunate enough that even in the hardest of hard times, I reflect back and go, no, I would still do what I did to get to where I am. Like that is good. And I think so often we forecast out where we hope that we want to get to, and we compare where we are to that rather than comparing that to where we were. And comparing it to where you were is almost always a much fairer comparison for your level of success. So I do that exercise quite a lot. It's very helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's just really on the mark. I see this a lot as well with clients, and you know, who I think all of us as entrepreneurs, right, and business owners, we tend to always focus on like the future goals and forget what we've done to get to where we are, not actually take the time to appreciate what we've accomplished. But you're right, looking back and going, okay, like where was I 6 months ago, a year ago? Have I made progress? Wow, look how much I've actually accomplished. Can help you to feel good, to see, okay, well, I've gotten to this point. Now let's look at where I want to get to next. So that's a great exercise. I appreciate you bringing that back up.
Very
let's talk about kind of as you were, well, actually, I'm going to maybe switch for a moment here. We talk about goals and kind of goal setting with business owners, and you talk about strategic goals. What is a strategic goal? Because people throw that word around. I mean, I just used it a moment ago, like setting goals into the future. What is, in your mind, Dave, what's the definition of a strategic goal, and how does it differ from a typical goal?
A strategic goal is one that is at a high enough level that it has a direct correlation to the team or the organization achieving its overarching mission and vision. Mm-hmm. So for me, the whole point of goal setting is to help you and your team link the actions that you take on a daily basis to achieving what your overarching mission and vision is for the organization. You know, any individual person takes anywhere between 80 and 120 non-trivial actions or decisions a day that are typically runway level. And if more of those bring us closer to our mission and vision, then that's a good day. If more of those take them further away, then it's a bad day. And so strategic goal setting for a team or an organization has to stay at that level. So it's typically going to be a longer term goal, usually something that's at least a year. And we can see that if we achieve that goal by the end of this year, that brings us closer to achieving whatever that overarching mission or vision is. And then you think about it, any strategic goal that you have or set for yourself is likely going to have more than one tactical project that sits underneath it. So to achieve our strategic goals, there's usually multiple layers of tactics that are there that we need to achieve. And so if you're kind of stress testing it, if you've got a strategic goal and there's really only one project that sits underneath it, it may not be at a high enough level. It might roll into something above that.
And what does that process look like? I mean, are you looking on and say, okay, here's our vision, our values, our mission, here's like where we want to be in 12 months or 24 months from today. Is it then about kind of reverse engineering that and going, well, in order for us to be at this point in 12 months, here's what we need to accomplish over the next, 4 quarters, and then break the quarterly down to the monthly and the monthly down to the weekly? Or is it, a different approach? Like, what do you find works best for you and for your clients to ensure they're actually really making meaningful progress on those strategic goals that they've identified?
I think you've got to take it from both sides. Most leaders and most organizations are pretty good at setting some longer term strategic goals and pretty good at knowing what they're doing on a daily basis. It's the bit in the middle that breaks down. So that's stuff that you were talking about, quarterly reviews and monthly reviews. Most strategic goals where they die is in that part, because there's not enough of a leading indicator on whether we're achieving it, and trying to stitch those two things together. So from a leadership perspective, having that implementation rhythm, and then from the rest of the organization inputting into that and saying, okay, here's my personal set of goals for the next month or the next quarter, and ensuring that there's at least a degree of tying of all of that up together. I think we've got to tackle it from both sides, because if you just take the top down perspective, you lose a lot of buy-in and empowerment and alignment from your team that you would get if you included them in the process.
Right. Great points. Your website, Dave, focuses and kind of puts a spotlight on your workshop, right? You have a big kind of in the main navigation says workshop. Is that the main offering that you have, or are there other offerings? Like, kind of take us through what are the different product services that you provide to the marketplace?
Most of the work that I do with organizations starts with a 2-day strategic planning session. So usually somebody comes to me and says, hey, Dave, I've read your work. I've seen you speak. Like I said, I do some keynote speaking. Would love for you to work with me and my team on helping some longer term planning. And in spending those 2 days together, we do two things. One, we create a plan for the next 12 months for the team, or we review their current plan and make changes to it if necessary. But secondly, it gives me the opportunity to assess how well that team functions together and where some of the issues and the challenges are. You know yourself that a good strategic plan is only as good as the people that are there to implement it. And one of the biggest downfalls or where strategic plans falter is if the leadership team isn't developed enough. They don't have the skill set or the tools to really build an implementation rhythm, or they don't have the ability to assess new inputs into their world to make changes or tweaks to that plan as they go along. And so after those 2 days, I usually come back and say, okay, well, here's the plan that you built. Looks great. And also here are my thoughts on how this team works together. Here are where some of the strengths are, here are where some of the development issues are. And at that point, then I engage a conversation that says, do you want some assistance on helping to address those? Because ultimately that's where this is going to succeed.
Right. And so that strategic session, is that the workshop? It's essentially like a 2-day workshop. Got you. And how do you find that most people reach out to you to begin the conversation of the workshop just by coming to your website? Is it that they've read, some of your content? I know you have some, you're a columnist, or you publish on Inc. Or is it through your keynote speaking? Like, which is the channel that you find drives most of the inquiries and kind of leads coming into your world?
Mostly it's through speaking. Secondly, it's through reading the book, and third, it's through referrals. So it's all in. There's all a degree of warmth there. I don't get a lot of cold folks calling and saying, "Hey, I stumbled across your website. Let's talk." There's right. Usually a degree of education that's happened.
Gotcha. Okay, so either they're reading, there's a referral, they see you speak, then they contact you. There's a 2-day workshop. That's kind of like what in our world we often describe as a discovery offer, a starting point. And then from there, you're identifying and providing recommendations for the client and ways to assist them, and that would then turn into a full engagement. Is that correct? Like,
yeah, that would be a longer term engagement. And so there's usually some version of, okay, there's some team assistance. So how do we build, an implementation rhythm and ensure that your team has the skill set to make high quality decisions for the organization, or there may be a recommendation for some ongoing one-on-one coaching with either the CEO, the president, or some other folks on the executive team to try to help glue all of that together, and that ends up being a longer term engagement.
And then, Dave, what do you do when a client or a prospective client comes to you and says, "Hey, Dave, I saw you speak. I'd love to get your help. I don't want to do the 2-day workshop thing. Let's just dive right into like a longer term engagement. We know what the issue is. Let's just get started." How do you respond to that? How do you handle that kind of situation?
It's funny because it does happen, and often my response is, I'm perfectly comfortable. We can do that, and I'll go and engage in a normal discovery call, and I'll say, okay, we can come up with some recommendations based on that. However, I want you to know that there will likely be some shifts and changes as we engage in this, and here are the 2 or 3 things that might likely come out. And it's your call. We could save some time and money at the front end by doing this and discovering some of those issues, or we can move forward and we'll have to address them as we go. And that can then go either way. Either they go, "Oh, you're right, yeah, let's start there," or they can say, "You know what, let's dig in and let's go with it," and we see what happens.
What percentage of your business would you say starts with the 2-day workshop as opposed to full engagement?
Almost all of it.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you come up with the pricing strategy for the workshop? I mean, some people, you hear people charging a couple $1,000s for a workshop, all the way up to $15,000, $25,000, for even a 1-day workshop. How did you think about and decide on where to price your 2-day workshop?
Well, having spent now 10 years in the industry doing it, I've got a pretty good sense of what the market rate is for the value that comes out of it. Yeah. And I think that whenever you have that good sense and you've got confidence in your ability to deliver on that value, it's a lot easier to stick a price tag on it and stick with it. So my experience in the previous boutique consultant company that I had gave me some base levels, and whenever I went out on my own, I was able to adjust according to some of the factors that are there.
Right. So again, everyone's going to want to know, well, what is the that market kind of rate? What does the industry typically bear? You can share as much as you're comfortable with, with your own situation, but also just what have you seen in other firms? What is that kind of standard for providing a 1-day or a 2-day workshop that you think is, kind of is the right level?
I mean, I think if you're delivering a really solid 1-day workshop, whether it's consulting or training, you've probably got a bandwidth of somewhere between about $5,000 and $14,000 to play in, depending on what it is, what the end result is for the organization. Also, there's just a degree of notoriety that gets built into that. Somebody's prepared to pay more for somebody that they know of. My sense is anything more than the 14 and you have to be in big well-known territory, and probably anything less than 5 and you're maybe selling yourself a little short. But that window of like 5 to 14, I think, is a place to play. And
so when you came with your pricing strategy, did you essentially say, okay, it's somewhere in that range, I'm doing it, this is a 2-day, not a 1-day, so it's just essentially doubling that fee? Or did you compensate for essentially expenses or like sunk costs? Like how did you think about the 1-day versus 2-day pricing?
Yeah, I think that you get the room to play in there and see what works. I personally don't just double the time. I think that you've got to tread a fine line between tagging a price to your time versus tagging a price to the value that you bring.
Yeah.
No, it can't always be that way, because of course you can say that to the client, but you're always thinking in your head, well, how much time is this taking from me anyway?
Right.
I do think that there's to use that old celebrity like diva line, there's a price to just get you out of bed, right? So if you think of whether it's a 90-minute keynote or a one-day workshop, there's a price to just get you there. Once you're there, however, particularly if it involves travel, you've done the travel, you've made that happen. How does that then play out over a day or two? And so I have you take the one day. If it's a 2-day, then there's an increment that's not as close to a full two-day fee.
Right. Have you increased your pricing over time, or is it stayed steady for last several years? What's the progression there been in your pricing?
After about a year, I incremented a little bit. I think I brought it down probably that first year just to test the market and see what it could bear. And then as you get busy, you get to then, your time is the scarce factor there. So you get to put it up and see if the market will bear it. I think COVID has caused an interesting pause on a lot of stuff. I think I was getting to the point of evaluating increasing it again, and then that happened, and I've just put a pause on everything. And I'm hoping that probably in the next 6 to 12 months we can go up again.
Yeah. So Dave, I mean, you are the facilitator for that 2-day workshop. Have you ever thought about building a team to help kind of with, delivery of the workshop, or even delivery of a full engagement after the workshop?
Many times. It's a conversation that I have internally with myself and with my wife quite a lot. In the previous company that I was with, that was my sole goal. So it was actually the family business. My father was a solo consultant and solo facilitator, and he said, I want to build a team out of this. So we went down that path and went down that process. And it has huge upshot, and it's also a lot of work. I think we assume that it's super easy to just get somebody in and say, well, this is what I do, you go do it. But just the root of codifying what it is that you do, training somebody to do that, quality controlling that, and also whenever it comes less pure training, more facilitation and consulting, the reality is that as a solo consultant, people are buying you. They may be buying your methodology as well, but quite often, if you're a one-man band, the connection is with you as a person. So how do you instill some of that in a group of other people? But then if you go down this route, you get the opportunity to scale, to grow a bit more. You're not the one that has to necessarily get on the plane and do it all the time, but then you've got an extra overhead of managing that side of things, and so it's all about being intentional with what you do. When I set out to build what I'm doing now, I said that's a decision that I might want to make. I don't necessarily want to make it right now, but I want to build enough I can't even say that word. Enough systems and process systemization. Thank you. Into what I'm doing, that should I make that decision at some point, it'll be a little easier to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we have a lot of resources on doing that. I've worked with many consultants, so we can chat after. I can send you some links or different things that might help in that journey. But that's really interesting. I mean, for you, what would it take, like, in order to, in your mind, to say, yeah, I'm now ready to build that out? Like, is there something in terms of a desire, or is there something you would need to have in order for it to be worthwhile for you? Or if you really think about it, is it, no, I'm just happy staying solo and staying kind of very lean and profitable? Like, what's that conversation in your mind right now?
I'm happy at the minute, definitely staying solo and lean. I think it would be market driven for me right now rather than personal driven. So if it got to the point where I was turning down some serious work because I, couldn't go out and do it because it was overbooked, I think that would be the point that I would seriously consider making that transition and making that leap. I think that would be it.
Yeah. So you mentioned COVID, and certainly for many people who generate leads or even generate revenue through in-person speaking, right? As you did, COVID posed a pretty big challenge. What's that been like for you in terms of moving more to kind of, the virtual online stage? Have you made any big shifts in your business that still remain today as we're now, starting to see some of the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to COVID?
Well, first of all, whenever all of this happened, the thing that I said to myself was, I am not just going to replicate what I do offline in a virtual setting, because it's just a different medium and it's a different way of delivery. And I'm not sure that everybody quite got that. My goal in any session that I deliver is to craft a really compelling experience for the participants, and merely sharing some slides on a Zoom call with a wire, with your, Apple wired microphones is just not going to cut it. So I invested a lot of time and money in building out a virtual studio here that would allow me to do that, and then just also getting much better at creating a compelling virtual experience, because you're not able to rely on the energy in the room to carry the session, and so you've got to draw that out of the folks a little bit more. I think it's now going to be fascinating to see. When you look at the prospect of truly hybrid sessions where, you are in a room with 20 other people and then there are 60 other people that are dialed in. I don't know whether that's going to be prevalent or not, but it'll be fascinating to see how that can be done, because I think that gives another opportunity for speakers and facilitators and consultants to just hone another part of their craft.
Yeah. Have you found any tool, technology that's helped you to make that environment richer and just more effective and valuable for your clients in terms of any tools or anything that you've done, software, just things that have helped you from the online kind of virtual standpoint?
Well, there's a couple of things. There's a tech setup. So I have what they call lighting, which I didn't know was a thing. It's a thing to well light a space. So I've got two lights here and I've got a light behind me, and that apparently is like what creates good light. I also had to learn that those ring lights aren't very good for people with glasses, because the ring actually comes into your glasses. You can't get rid of it. So you can only just see the square lights here. It's much better. I've got a large monitor here with actually two webcams on it that allows me to switch my view if I need to, if I'm talking to the audience or I'm looking at my slides. Investing in a good microphone and a good setup that way, I think is huge. But then there's so that's just the tech side of things. And we all know that tools are just tools. Right. Finding in other places where virtual training is happening and getting inspiration there, I think is also really important. Funny thing was I bought, just before the lockdown, I bought a Peloton, and watching how their trainers essentially make the same shift, which was away from a hybrid model to a purely virtual model, was fascinating. And just seeing how they engage a completely virtual audience, I think I took a huge number of tips away from them. I think it's like learning any skill, just trying to find examples of it being well done in practice, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great idea. I mean, there's so many examples that have been successful in people borrowing ideas from different industries, bringing them into their own where they haven't really been seen before. That the one from Peloton is a great example, where you're almost kind of gamifying that experience or bringing a lot more interactivity to it. So you're not just staring at a screen, looking at your own bike or your own, movement. There's a community, there's others to kind of replicate the environment of being in a class, looking over and seeing someone, sweating or being yelled at by a teacher. And right. I've actually never had that experience because I've never been on a stationary bike like that, but that's my belief of what it looks like. So I may be off the mark there, but
no, you describe it like you've been part of it. That's exactly it. And actually also one of the things that they're very good at that I've started to try to integrate in my own sessions is honoring the commitment that participants have made to be there. Like, thank you for choosing to spend the time here with me today. Like, you could have been anywhere else. I mean, it may have been mandated by your boss, but you're here. So thank you. Intention setting as well. Like, what do you want to get out of this session? Why are you here? What does success look like for you? How can I best serve that and help you get there? I think is really, really helpful in a virtual setting, because there's so many distractions, right? And I think when we try to implement gimmicky ways to engage people without giving them the opportunity to truly set their intention, then it can fall a little flat. But if you just look at somebody and say, look, you're here, you've chosen to be here, thank you. What you get out of this time is directly related to what you want to put into it. So let's spend a couple of minutes and give you the opportunity to reflect on what you want to put into this. And there's no right or wrong answer about that. It's just about you checking in with yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're making me think about something that we've done recently, which over kind of this period of COVID, we started to run online workshops in small groups, like 8 to 15 people or so. And one of the things that I found, just based on the feedback from participants, that people have been finding most valuable is really trying to make it interactive. Like I actually say to people at the beginning, hey guys, we can all see each other here on the Zoom screens, but I want you to think about this in a way that, imagine we were in one room, like a conference room or something together, right? So that means that you wouldn't be looking at your phone, right? If I was up at the front and I could see you like physically, right? If you're right there. So please don't look at your phone during this time. Like this is your time, make the most of it. And then really engaging with people and allowing them the opportunity to ask questions or just that interactivity. And I think the engagement is so powerful because it's so easy to get lost in the digital side where you have other tabs and other things going on, but you would never hopefully have that kind of distraction if you were sitting in front of a presenter or a speaker or somebody facilitating a workshop. So we found that those kind of small group workshops have been really, really great. In some cases, we even spread them over a couple of days so people have time to reflect on what we've learned or what we've kind of gone through in day one. And then they can work on that and come back a few days later or a week later, and we then do the second session. And now they can actually get feedback and critiques on what they've done in day one. So that's just a little structure that we found to work really well. I think ties into exactly what you've just been talking about, Dave.
Yeah, I think that's a great structure. I do think that, taking what used to be a one-day workshop and making it into two-hour workshops or 2-3 hour workshops that are split out over time, I think gives folks that opportunity to practice and then get some feedback. I think the other thing that, is good to remember is that people process their takeaways in essentially 3 ways, either through their own internal reflection, through talking to it one-on-one or in a really small group, or in a larger group debrief. And too often, facilitators fall foul and just go straight to the group debrief. And whenever you do that, all you're doing is giving the folks who process that way the opportunity to share more. And so building in times for individual reflection, and if you feel comfortable using something like the breakout rooms to put people in 2s or 3s for a smaller group reflection before you come for a broader discussion, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, fantastic tips there. So Dave, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast here today. And I want to make sure that people can learn more about you, your work, your book, just everything else you have going on. Where is the best place? What's kind of the one URL website that everyone should check out?
You talked earlier about Outfield Leadership, which is that 2-day workshop. Feel free to go there. If you want to learn more about the book, go to self-evolvedleader.com, and it's you can find out all of the information there. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter at Dave McKeown, so check me out there.
There we go. All right, everyone. We'll have all the show notes, transcript, everything else, all the good stuff over at consultingsuccess.com. Just type in Dave McKeown, and yeah, fantastic. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Michael.